Pregame.com and check your favorite car lover off your holiday shopping list.
If you missed your favorite ESPN Syracuse shows, listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts. ESPN 97.7 and 100.1. This is the Burdick Ford and Burdick Toyota pregame show.
Oh, what's up, everybody, here on this Saturday afternoon? Brian Higgins with you all. Cuse-Georgetown 100 coming your way in 1 hour's time inside the Dome today. We'll see if they can, wake up the echoes a little bit, rattle the 80s. Maybe anyone need to punch somebody in the face? No, it's frowned upon. Frowned upon. Throw a chair somewhere. Lots of technicals? No, frowned upon. Frowned upon. But it is Cuse-Georgetown. Nobody throw any oranges at the court. It would be bad. That would be bad. But getting you ready for the 100th all-time meeting between the Orange and the Hoyas. Syracuse leads the series 53-44. Have won 3 of the last 4, including the last 2, as they get ready to try to get to 3 straight, 2-0 under Red Autry in a game featuring 2 somewhat scuffling teams. I think we've all seen the Orange get to this point. They're 5-4 right now, and we know this. They've yet to lose in the Dome. They've yet to win away from the Dome. They've yet to beat anybody of significant note yet this season. Georgetown is 7-2, which, math on the face of it is better than 5-4. But when you dig in a little bit here on Georgetown, they're kind of in the same boat as Syracuse. They're 7-2. Their 2 losses, West Virginia and Notre Dame. They lost to Notre Dame that was more at full strength earlier in the year. Their 7 wins are against, nobody of anything remotely anything right now. Nothing relevant, nothing interesting, nothing sexy as they get ready for the game today. So both teams badly needing in some kind of statement win, some, little history, little rivalry, all the good stuff that comes when it is Syracuse and Georgetown here today for the 100th time. We get the question all the time. How much does this game still mean? It doesn't mean what it once did. It couldn't possibly mean what it once did. These teams met 27 times in the 1980s. That is darn near impossible. That means they played twice a year, every year for a decade, and then in 7 of the 10 years, they met again in the Big East tournament. No wonder there was a fight or two during the course of that time when most players were staying for 4 years, when Pearl leaving after 3 was exceedingly random. I mean, they played Patrick Ewing 10-plus times during the 1980s. You wonder how a rivalry is built and why there's animosity. That's how it builds up. Now you play once a year, you play in December. It's still got meaning, it's still got history to it, but no, it'll never quite be the same again. That said, still pretty fun. Would rather be doing this than anything else on this Saturday. What do we got coming up here on this pregame show? If you'd like to join us, feel free to chime in. 315-437-7644 is our number. Get your pregame thoughts. You headed up to the Dome, settling in to watch whatever you got going on here this Saturday afternoon, wherever you may be here in Syracuse or out and about all around on Cuse Sports Talk, CuseSportsTalk.com. And in a little bit, we'll check in with Patrick Stevens. He joined me yesterday in the 315. He covers the Hoyas for the Washington Post. Has done some stuff for Syracuse.com in the past as well. Bracketologist to the stars. Patrick will join us here in a bit coming up. Next segment. Besides that, we'll set the table. We'll look back at Syracuse's win against Albany last time out, figure out how they've gotten here to this point, and see what the deal is today with Syracuse and Georgetown. What is it going to take for the Orange to win the ball game today? Well, let's start with this. Let's go back to Tuesday night in the Dome. Syracuse staggered in at 4-4. We know J.J. Starling remains out with a broken left hand. Albany was sitting there. Albany's is the best way to describe what Albany was bringing to the Dome on Tuesday night. And then Syracuse went out and had a very comprehensive performance in the first half. Built a lead as large as 24 in the second half, and then kind of turned off the tap with about 10 minutes to go. And they did win by 17, but it dwindled to 11 and got more interesting, I think, than Red Autry would have liked at various points in the second half.
I thought the second half, it was good up until the last probably 8 minutes. We stopped playing, got a lead, stopped playing. I put some people in that I thought were ready. They wasn't ready. That was on me, and we made it a game. We shouldn't have made this a game, but we did, and I'll take the blame on that.
And, they end up and go win by 17, so home, it was fine to the end. But lessons around every quarter at this time of the year for the Orange. We saw from some intriguing performances, certainly at the offensive end. Donnie Freeman did not start for the first time of the season. He was dealing with a personal matter that kept him on the bench for the start of the game, but then played his regular minutes and had a fantastic game. It was a career-high 24 points for Freeman. Jair Davis started in his set and played a fantastic offensive game. He did not miss a shot and ended up with 15 points. So those two combined for 39. But with Red, it appears we've known this from the beginning, and this crystallizes more and more and more the more you hear him talk after games and see how he relates what he is saying to how somebody's just played. Those two combined for 39 points. That's a lot of points. Yet?
Well, I think Jair and Donnie, obviously, those two guys can score, but we needed them to do a little bit more. We need these guys to rebound the ball a little bit more. And Jair's an unbelievable rebounder, and I thought he had a couple that he just watched at the end. And I told him, I said, you're one of the best rebounders, out there. And you got to go get that. Offensively, these guys can score. They can step out. They can make a couple of shots. They're good around the basket. They're a big part of what we're doing. We got one of the better front courts, I believe, in the country, productive front courts in the country. But, we got to get these guys in our team better, on the other end, as far as rebounding the ball and finishing off stops. We got them to miss a couple of times, and we don't come up with the rebound. So,
you're going to have to guard the rim a little bit today against the Hoyas. They prefer to get the ball inside when they can, and Syracuse, be it Davis, be it Freeman, be it Lampkin, be it whomever, somebody is going to have to do something resembling guarding the rim, else Georgetown freshman center, all 6'11", 255 of them, Thomas Sorber is going to have himself a field day. Large dude, but nimble in the post for the Hoyas. Also, as far as last game, we've been watching Chris Bell be in a season-long funk. I'd probably call it a season-long funk. He's not shot the ball up to his caliber, Bell's character, from the outside. He's still shooting mid to upper 20% when last year he was in the 40s from three-point land. And with that, as opposed to seeing growth in the rest of the game like we had hoped for from last year, we'd seen at minimum stasis and realistically decline in the rest of his game. So Tuesday night for Chris, I think was also, it was kind of a good news, bad news kind of game. Still couldn't hit a three. He was 0 for 3 from the outside. But we've seen that recently. It dragged down his free throw shooting. He'd been 2 from his last 8 over the last 2 games. Made all 6. Despite not hitting a 3, ended up with 16 points, hit the glass more than he normally does. He had 6 rebounds, and Red Autry approved.
I was happy with the way Chris played, and he got 6 rebounds today. Chris really, even though he missed 3 shots, he had 3 wide opens. When it'll come for him. I think he's obviously pressing a little bit, but I just thought, he showed more of his game today.
So, yeah, we saw a lot of that from Bell. That said, as good as that is, and as it's nice as it is to see Bell doing other stuff, you want the other stuff. Chris Bell rebounding, good. Chris Bell scoring at places that are not the three-point line, good. Chris Bell being generally engaged, good. But if he's not hitting threes on top of it, Syracuse's floor balance can get a little bit wonky. So hopefully the three-point shot comes back at some point this season, because as nice as it is to potentially see growth in his game, the Orange need the thing that he is adding to be present as well. You can't grow elsewhere and lose the thing that you're excellent at. So hopefully his three-point shot will find form at some point sooner than later, perhaps as soon as today. Maybe today? I don't know. We had yet another change to the starting lineup last game. Well, we had a couple. We had the one because of Freeman. That would be presumably not permanent. I would imagine Donnie will return to the starting 5 today. The one that I think is going to be permanent, at least for the foreseeable future, probably at least until J.J. Starling returns, was the insertion of Elijah Moore into the starting lineup. So J.J. went down, broken hand. Lucas Taylor started the next 2 games. He started Tennessee and Notre Dame, both losses on the road. Red Autry thinking pretty much what I've been thinking the whole time. The Orange need a little more punch out there from the old get-go. At the start of the game, popped Elijah Moore into the starting lineup. Elijah did not have the same caliber of game as he had of late. But 6 points, did a bunch of other stuff, and Red, had a good reason for making the decision.
I thought we needed, someone else in there to give us a punch and, some scoring punch and a guy that can kind of make plays off the bounce. I thought when we started Lucas the other day, we wanted him thinking more defensive-minded, and I think our offense, took a hit from that. We only scored 64 points, but we had a lot of empty possessions, So
we'll see where it goes today. I have a sense that, all right, assuming that Chapa starts today, second career start, Georgetown here, you get the blood boil a little bit in the Dome. You're kind of used to being on the court at the get-go. I think we'll see a much better, much cleaner offensive game from Chapa today because without JJ, with Bell struggling on the outside shot, you need somebody on the floor to at least be a threat, be able to balance the floor a little bit, be able to space it out so Lampkin and Freeman or Davis or whomever have room to work inside. It just seems like it's got to be Elijah Moore in the game at the beginning, at least until J.J. Starling presumably returns from injury mid-January. We're expecting to have J.J. on the 315 next week. Thursday, tentative plan, Thursday. We'll begin our weekly visits with J.J. Starling, brought to you by our friends at RomanoCars.com. Obviously, plenty to talk with him about as he continues to recover from the broken hand. So there's a look back to Tuesday night. Syracuse knocking off Albany, 102-85. Most points scored this season, still giving up a lot of points. It was a very eye of the beholder kind of game. Won by 17, good. Defense, first half, good. Second half, yeah, not as much. We'll see how it all carries over to this afternoon. A 2:30 tip on the ACC Network, TK99 at ESPN 1200 in the 100th all-time meeting between Syracuse and Georgetown. With that, we'll step aside for a few. Phone lines open the remainder if you'd like to chime in. Your thoughts ahead of this one. 315-437-7644. Immediately next as well, we'll check in with Patrick Stevens, who covers the Hoyas for the Washington Post. All that and more, we're back after this on our pregame coverage brought to you by Burdick here on Cuse Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.
Wednesday.
What is up, chat? How are we? What's up, Frank? Followed by lots of numbers and letters. What is up, YouTube? Shouts to the YouTube. While you clean the house and inflate Santa? What kind of Santa? Freeman was not sick. Someone on Twitter remembers when this was a marquee game on CBS and the Dome was rocking. Now the ACC Network and nobody cares as Autry has destroyed the program. There was 30 years between those two events, but that's okay. It's 1:43, T-Takes. Is it like a perma blow up and you got to blow it up, or one where it blows up when it's on and then it redeflates when it's off? I am supporting my team, Supercat. I generally don't wear Syracuse gear on the pre- or post-game shows, And impartial journalists like myself, we can't be biased. We don't have any blow-ups like that. We got lights galore. And this hoodie is cozy. I just have to let you know now that by this time tomorrow, which will be early second quarter, the Giants will be in a devastating hole against the Baltimore Ravens. ACC Network, Frank. Man, back in the day, you could count it a good technical or two in a Cuse-Georgetown game. R.I.P. John Thompson. Glorious. What a large man. Yeah, this game means something to Red. Man, Red was playing this in the early 90s. He was playing against Morning and Matumbo. The series was still burning pretty hot then. If I did Florida guy, I didn't really absorb it. What's he listed at? Well, Sorber, their center's listed at 6'11", I think, so maybe we can get him back to back. I mean, I read Mike's articles yesterday, so if that was in there, I glazed over it.
Show.
All right, back at it here on this Saturday. Cuse-Georgetown, the 100th all-time meeting. Red Autry versus Ed Cooley for just the second time. Jim Boeheim, John Thompson, they coached against each other just a few more times than that. Red himself, this will be Red's, lose count of all the games as assistant. Red had 9 games against Georgetown as a player. He went 6-3 in those games, including winning the 1992 Big East Championship. Red's senior day, when he scored 21, was a win against Georgetown as well. So he knows the history well. He coached against him and beat him last year. So Red knows the deal. I think, his counterpart, Ed Cooley, kind of learned the deal a little bit last year. He wasn't as steeped in the history of it all, for sure, being new there, not after the run of Thompson and to Craig Esherick. Esherick did play for Georgetown, but, Esherick into JT3 and then into Patrick Ewing. There was good, bad, or otherwise, there was significant continuity all that time. And then obviously, essentially the whole time it was Boeheim for Syracuse and then Red last year. So we'll see how it all plays out this year. Yesterday on my show, I got a chance to visit with Patrick Stevens. He covers the Hoyas for the Washington Post, does many, many other things. We like to talk lacrosse with Patrick as well. And if you need a bracket, pick a sport. If you need some bracketology, he is the man for the job. So the first thing we got into when we chatted yesterday, and I think this has been a significant topic of conversation around here for a half decade or so now, and longer going back to the end of the Big East, but it's really picked up seemingly on an annual basis the last few years. What's this game still mean? We talk about what it means up here all the time. That's the first thing I asked Patrick. Down in the D.C. area, down in the DMV, where are we at with Syracuse and Georgetown and the meaning of this series?
Well, it's kind of hard to say at this point, just because it's been so long since Georgetown's been good that you kind of look at it and you would argue anything that can generate some sort of excitement and some sort of attention for Georgetown's a good thing. But the Hoyas have really kind of fallen under the radar a bit just because of how the last 6, 7, 8 years have gone. And so, I certainly think that more so than any team that Georgetown typically faces, that Syracuse is a team that moves the needle for their fans and for fans around here. But at the same time, this is a team that's struggling to kind of get some traction again. And they're 7-2, and they've largely done what they're supposed to do this year, and it's Ed Cooley's job for them to get some traction. So this is, I think, a highlight of the non-conference schedule. But at the same time, Georgetown is certainly in a spot where they're still trying to reestablish things as a program that people need to pay attention to.
Yeah, it's so interesting, the Ed Cooley side of things, right? Because obviously it had fallen, unfortunately, the last couple of years there, Patrick Ewing. It was at the depth of the bottom of the pits. You couldn't get much lower than what things were doing there the last maybe year or two of Ewing. We all kind of know Cooley's success story at Providence. We also know, transfer portal, you can turn things around quicker than you used to be able to in college basketball. How big is the job here for Cooley, especially considering how competitive the Big East is?
Well, the interesting thing is that after he came in, he gets hired fairly late, like mid to late March. Sorry, I'm in football mode a little bit here, thinking about hires in November. But mid to late March, and at a place like Georgetown, it's not necessarily as easy to get everybody into school and get all the I's dotted and T's crossed and whatnot. So we relied on some transfers and last year, and it didn't go very well. And so their strategy this year has been. They were selective in who they added through the portal. They added a kid named Micah Peavy, who's their best defensive player from TCU as a grad transfer. They brought in Malik Mack from Harvard. They brought in a couple other guys. I think Jordan Burks from Kentucky, who was kind of a deeper reserve last season, was the most prominent of that bunch. But then they relied on a lot of freshmen. And I think the idea for Georgetown is that they're actually going to do it a little old school, or at least try to. And develop some of these younger guys, like a Thomas Sorber, who's been starting at center all season. You've got guys like Caleb Williams, who comes off the bench as kind of a wing, and Kayvon Mulready, a backup point guard as well, which makes it kind of an interesting way to evaluate them for this season. I think you can argue that you won't be able to determine until about the 1st of May whether it was a successful season for Georgetown, just based on how much retention they're able to do with some of these young guys once the spring and the portal season comes along.
As Patrick Stevens as well as covers the Hoyas for the Washington Post, Patrick, I have not been down to, where they practice in McDonough Arena and all that for, it's got to be 12-ish years. Whenever Syracuse left the Big East, it would be the last time that I've seen it down there. Obviously, the facilities there, they probably weren't great at the time. Obviously, the actual arena is, a different situation when you're playing in an NBA arena. Has there been, institutional backing of all that stuff? Obviously, when you go out and make the Cooley hire, it feels like it. Has the same been the case in facilities and NIL and all the stuff you need to have the backing for a program these days?
Well, since Syracuse was in the Big East, Georgetown went ahead and built a building called the John Thompson Center that's adjacent. It's adjacent to McDonough Arena, and so they've got I think it opened in 2016, 2017 in there, and they've got their own practice court and all this other stuff, and so they certainly were able to push the chips in facility-wise on that back in maybe 7, 8, 9 years or so ago.
Okay.
They're obviously still playing at Cap One. Now, a problem you have there is when you've struggled for as long as you have, people are kind of reluctant to go and pay pro arena prices for stuff. And so they played in front of some really, really modest crowds at times this season. I think 3 games of less than 3,000 announced in a 20,000-seat arena. That does not look good, obviously, and it's been, except for Notre Dame, a smattering of teams that you they're bye games, they're scheduling wins as much as anything else. So I think part of Cooley's mandate is to figure out a way to generate more NIL revenue and what have you, and I think that's as much as anything. Probably the area that was as much a priority last season, even more so than the actual games that were going on, especially when you consider that they only brought 2 guys back from the rotation from a season ago. So I know Georgetown is trying to get itself back to where it needs to be in that sense.
It's an extremely different roster looking at it this year than it was last year, which realistically, is the case for so many teams. Sadly, now literally every year trying to figure out who all these guys are. Malik Mack, to us up here, was a name that popped because you go back to March and April when Syracuse was in the market for a point guard as well. There was some admirable one way, maybe a little mutual interest before he ended up at Georgetown. Clearly a Harvard guy you'd think would be able to pass Georgetown's admission standards and get in. What kind of player is Malik after he was so good in the Ivy League last year?
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. He's one of those guys that I haven't quite figured out yet, even after 9 games. So far, I wouldn't say that he's been overwhelmingly great, but you also have to look at, he shares the team lead in assists. He's shooting almost 40% from 3. He certainly had his moments where he's played well. I don't think that he is the most valuable player on the team. I think that's, frankly, Micah Peavy. just because of the value he brings defensively. He's not the best scorer on the team, and I think that's Jaden Epps, who is one of the two main returnees. And I don't think he's really the best player. Not the most valuable, not the best scorer, not the best player. I think that's Thomas Sorber. But he's still a really important piece, and it remains to be seen just how well he's going to be able to hold up. I mean, the interesting thing when you think about Cooley's teams at Providence, they had all those big guards, remember? Yeah. And, like right now they're trotting out a couple little guys in Epps and Mack. And so that's kind of something that's been interesting to watch, how a Cooley team operates, with smaller guards while trying to maintain sort of that ethos of toughness and ruggedness and all that stuff.
Yeah, I think about Chris Dunn and the guys like that at Providence. They had some dudes up there that were big physical specimens. And heck, we're used to thinking of big physical specimens when we think about Georgetown and historically, and certainly if you followed Syracuse, if you start naming Georgetown players, my guess is you're going to start at centers and rip a few of them off. Well, what is Thomas Sorber? He's the leading scorer, leading rebounder. How good is this guy as a freshman right now?
The interesting thing to me about watching him was just the first time I saw him practice, I'm like, he moves really well for a freshman big. Like he sees the game really well. I mean, I think there are going to be times this year where he, against good teams, ends up leading them in assists, in addition to points and rebounds. I mean, he's really, really good. So I think that the other thing that we saw from the game up at West Virginia last Friday, they were really in it. And Sorber picks up his fourth foul with maybe 13 minutes to go, and West Virginia scores the next 10 points, and basically the game's over at that stage. He's the guy that needs to be on the floor for them to be able to really beat anybody of substance. It's probably not fair to put that sort of onus on a freshman, but it's the truth, especially with a backup center, Julius Halifanoa, who's out after suffering a fractured ankle over Thanksgiving.
Ooh, yeah. There's depth issues on both teams right now, for sure, with some injuries. What do you make of this game? Like, what do you think decides this game tomorrow, Patrick?
Oh, gosh. I mean, I think, first of all, one interesting thing I would point out is that, Syracuse, obviously kind of an average foul shooting team. Georgetown has allowed the best free throw shooting percentage in the country. Opponents are shooting 82% against them at the foul line this year. So that's sort of an interesting quirk. But I think ultimately it's going to be, can Syracuse kind of contain a guy like a Sorber and kind of match up there? I know, Georgetown saw Eddie Lampkin last year when he was playing for he wasn't TCU, right? Or did he make a stop? He was at Colorado, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was Colorado last year, 3 years at TCU before that. He's been around the block, yep.
They did not see him last year. They saw him a few years back. They've actually played TCU a couple times. But anyway, I think that's going to be a really key matchup, how Sorber matches up on the inside there. And then also, I think you're kind of looking at a guy like a Micah Peavy, who's obviously established himself as an excellent defensive player. Who ultimately does he match up on in this game, especially, with J.J. Starling injured? He's going to draw a really good assignment, and whoever that is that number one assignment, can they get something going? So, how does Sorber do, and how does whoever ultimately Peavy is matched up on? I think those are going to be two really big factors in this game.
All right, our guy Patrick Stevens. Good to chat with Patrick yesterday. Covers the Hoyas for the Washington Post. Will we talk to Patrick during lacrosse season? You bet your butt. He covers some lacrosse now. So we'll put that in our back pocket for now. Let's get a little this day in SU basketball history from the Shep Family Funeral Home. Celebrate your loved one with help from Shep. Visit shepfamily.com. And, we get to these games, we always reminisce. I told you the Red stat, so he was 6-3 against the Hoyas as a player. So, 4 years he played Georgetown 9 times in 4 years, which actually put Syracuse in like a deficit of volume of times playing Georgetown from the 80s, where they played 2 times every year in the regular season and then met in 7 of the 10 Big East tournaments in the 1980s. That's wild. 7 of the 10. I realized there weren't a million teams in the league back then, but just due to sheer order of operations, you shouldn't have met in 7th of the 10. But that tells you how good both programs were and how relevant both programs were and the whole thing. I always go back to the 1990 game. The John Thompson triple technical game is kind of my intro to the rivalry and the whole thing. There's just so much great stuff. Georgetown and Syracuse, the Orange leading the all-time series 53-44. Remember last year when Judah Mintz was going to transfer to Georgetown? Remember that? That was 100% locked in, so y'all told me. So that didn't happen. Recent series since the Big East. This will be the 10th meeting post-Big East. So 10% now of the all-time Syracuse-Georgetown games will be post-Big East affairs. The Orange lead those games 5-4. Cuse has won the last 2, 3 of the last 4. First 7 games after the 2 were no longer in the same conference were all decided by 10 or less or overtime. Last 2 years, a little bit wider margin. 2 years ago, the Orange won by 19 in the Dome, 83-64, a game in which one Jesse Edwards dominated with 20 points and 11 boards. Judah Mintz had 16 and 10 assists. Last year, it was the Orange backcourt that carried the day down in D.C., a Judah Mintz homecoming in an 80-68 win for Syracuse. Mintz had 25. J.J. Starling had 21. Obviously, neither of those two will factor in the game today. With that, we will take a break. If you'd like to chime in here on our pregame coverage, you may. 315-437-7644. We'll get our Harding and Mazzotti injury report. J.J. Stillard. And much, much more. Final thoughts, keys to the game as we roll along toward a 2:30 tip time inside the Dome this afternoon. All that as we come back after this on Cuse Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.
This is...
But he said it so many times, Alphabet Guy, that I have to blame all of you for it. Does he shoot it well? I don't think he's necessarily a floor stretcher type, Cajun Slamgrass. But he's good. I think he does most of his damage near the bucket. I have sources on Lampkin's current physical state. Paulie's been watching him. Sources. Well sourced. Would we have any more wins with Malik Brown? So, are you saying, like, if we have the same exact team and we just add Malik Brown to it? Yeah. No, and no. Nikki Vegas, I will be doing my normal show on Wednesday, then going home. And the bowl game, I will be in this general region, I think. Unless we end up doing pregame out and about somewhere. We're still, we will be in the general area, though. How is the crowd looking? Anybody there? What's it look like? How we doing? Crowd? Crowd check? I say nobody has fronted the tab for me to go to the dart event on Wednesday, and I'm not darting out 500 bones for it. It is not, it's not a media event, to my understanding, Nick. It is more, it's an NIL event that they are clearly trying to enhance the attendance of. Jordan was checking to see if we could get some free tickets to give away to it. I don't know if anything came of that. I was not assuming it would, but it never hurts to ask. Yeah, Lampkin's fine. Give it up. Paulie said he was looking even more spry. Not at the moment, Frank, unless you'd like to dial in. IHOP delivery. What are you getting from IHOP at 2 in the afternoon, Govinda? What's the play? Getting a tall stack? Syrups? Side of bacon? Family breakfast meal. I don't even know what to call that meal at this hour. It's not like breakfast for dinner. It's not even really brunch. You're just going for it. We made lights on the lake tonight. Maybe do a little like watch the game into hides into lights on the lake. There you go.
Verdict Toyota pregame show.
Oh, that it is. Brian Higgins with you. Saturday afternoon. Rocking it out here in the Cuse on the radio. Cuse Sports Talk, CuseSportsTalk.com. Cuse Sports Talk YouTube is popping as well. Glad to have you all with us here today for Cuse, Syracuse, and Georgetown 100. The pregame warm-up shirts for Syracuse today are an homage to that rivalry with that information on it. So that's kind of cool as we get into the game here today. Time for our Harding and Mazzotti injury report. Thankfully, nothing new to add today. My goodness, the Harding and Mazzotti injury report has been more active than we like of late. Unfortunately, that means J.J. Starling is still on it and will be for the foreseeable future here out with a broken left hand today. Indefinitely remains the latest actual words on it. There's really been no actual update. I mean, generally you have a broken hand. You go back every 3 weeks and they retake the x-rays, see how it's healing, all that good stuff. So there's really, it's not like you can test it out. It's not like you can go for like, well, let's do a little jog down the hallway and see how it's feeling. No, they gotta take the old picture of the inside of your hand and see what's going on in there. So no JJ today. We do have a court side of the court warm-up sources. Not everywhere has side of the court warm-up sources. Mine may or may not be named Paulie. Paulie, I mean, we have warm-up sources like nobody in the business. Paulie says this from like an hour ago. Lampkin, more active. First one out for warm-ups. Oh, he says Eddie Lampkin's looking a spry Eddie Lampkin today. I'll say this. I look at Lampkin here. Obviously, the back's been bothering him all year. I go back to the Texas game. He played so well in the Texas game, which was a loss down at Barclays. And then clearly, what did he play? 37 minutes. He was doing all this stuff. Clearly, it took a toll the next night. And then he's been essentially immobile ever since. Until Tuesday night against Albany, where you're like, all right. His body seems to be functioning here a little bit. So maybe he's rounding the corner on that. Maybe he's rounding the corner on that. Hopefully. This is one of these things, especially today with Georgetown. Now, Georgetown has some injuries of their own. They've got some depth pieces that are out with injury. But Thomas Sorber is a freshman center for them. Now, Alonzo Mourning, Patrick Ewing, Dikembe Mutombo, Othello Harrington, he ain't. Is he Ruben Boomshay? I don't know. Should we just keep naming Georgetown centers because it's fun? Maybe we should. But he's a guy, 6'11", he's like 255. He's so we're told, very mobile for his size. So Syracuse is going to need a mobile Lampkin to keep up with him. And that said, as good as Sorber has been for a freshman, and he is Georgetown's leading scorer and leading rebounder right now, he's averaging 15 points, 8 rebounds a game on the season. Like, he is a freshman. If Lampkin is, healthy, mobile, locked in, all that stuff today, his offensive creativity could take advantage potentially of a freshman. If he's hampered by the back, a 6'11", powerful post threat of a freshman could then cause Syracuse significant issues. How does Donnie Freeman factor in on defense coming from the forward spot and sometimes playing center today? Is Syracuse's freshman who's playing so well of late with 20 or more points now in 3 of his last 4 games. I think these things are going to be very interesting. It's a matchup of 2 teams that, oh boy, they can't shoot it from the outside. Neither team can shoot it from the outside. Neither team can shoot it from the outside. So we'll see where it all goes on that. But at least from Paulie having eyes on Lampkin an hour ago. Out first for warm-ups, looking good moving around, looked his best moving around in about 3 weeks on Tuesday night. You never know. You never know with a back injury. This is what I hear from people that have back injuries. And I'm fingers crossed good on the backside of things here. But just like when it's not working, it ain't working, and there's not a lot you can do about it. He was a little mobile on Tuesday. In a game like this, hey, it's Cuse-Georgetown. In Cuse-Georgetown, a lot of stuff generally happens near the rim. That's been the case for 5 decades now. So we'll see how Lampkin's doing today. We know Thomas Sorber is a main piece on the inside for the Hoyas. That is a little bit of a Harding and Mazzotti injury report today. Thankfully, nothing new to add to it for the Orange right now. We'll see if the starting lineups come in, see if Donnie Freeman's back in the starting 5 today. I would presume so, after coming off the bench on Tuesday night. And our keys to the game as we get closer and closer to a 2:30 tip time inside the Dome this afternoon. Time for a quick call as well when we come back at 315-437-7644. We'll get our final thoughts, keys to the game, and set you up for Cuse-Georgetown 100. All when we come back after this on Cuse Sports Talk and ESPN Radio. Michael Sweetney, Alphabet guy. Yeah, Michael Sweetney, like he was a big guy in college, but he wasn't like ridiculous big. Like he was strong. With the Knicks, he got like fat. He got huge. Oh, Roy Hibbert. Was Mokhtar Njai? Was that a Georgetown guy? I just like saying Ruben Boomshay. Georgetown all-time centers. I just want a list. Give me a list. Here's top 100 Hoyas. Let's just scroll. Mike Sweetney, number 10. Othello Harrington, number 13. They got Othello Harrington ahead of Dikembe Mutombo? In college, maybe. I don't know. Paul Tagliabue, the NFL commissioner. Ruben Boomshay. There he is, checking in at 52. Boubacar Al. How could I forget Boubacar? Yes, R.I.P. Mutombo. Mokhtar was UNC, James? Who leads, Joseph? Syracuse has won 53 of the They lead 53-44. 50. What do they lead? Yes. No. That doesn't add up to 99. That can't be the right number. 55-44? Who wrote the wrong number for the series? Dikembe. Oh, in the last 20 years. Okay, I heard that stat without the 20-year qualifier, and I was confused because the way it was presented to me, Gavendo, is that he had the most points for Syracuse ever against Georgetown. I'm like, that can't possibly be true. It's got to be like DC or somebody like that. But in the last 20 years, all right. That I can believe. Yeah, 53-44 isn't 99. So I feel like I've been fed false stats. Could be Moten. I'm just saying, like, DC probably played more games against Georgetown than Moten. Obviously, Moten's a good guess for anything like that. I'd say it's got to be like DC, Moten, Stevie Thompson, maybe. Stop showing me bowl game stuff. I just want to look at the basketball game. Trish wouldn't have. They weren't playing twice a year then. 53-46 would also be that. Hang on. Got a minute to look this up properly. 54-45 apparently is the answer. Split the difference. That also equals 100. Yeah, I'm going to... Is there any good way to look this up? Syracuse's all-time leading scorer against Georgetown. I don't know if there's any good way to look this up. Yeah, I mean, it's got to be DC, Moten, or Stevie Thompson, something like that. Nothing else really makes sense. Yeah, JJ3. All right, last few minutes with you here today, getting you ready for Cuse-Georgetown, number 100. We fixed our errant math from before. The all-time series is, what did I say, 54-45? Yeah, that equals 99. That's the right amount of games. Some math errors. Can't play 100 games without the wins and losses of the previous 99 equaling 99. That is useful stuff as we get you ready for the 100th version of Syracuse and Georgetown. I'm looking forward to this game. And, you know, I don't know what you guys think. Like, I still think there is a place for this game on the schedule. Like, all right, take this out and replace it with just generic whatever. So, generic, you know, Power 6, however many Power whatever the hell conferences in basketball. Say this game was, I don't know, a random Big Ten opponent. Say they were playing Illinois or whatever, you know, Minnesota. Say they were playing Big 12 team like TCU. I mean, I'd rather be playing Georgetown than whatever the equivalent of Georgetown is in any of the other conferences. It's still a little something. Yeah, Tronic says Penn State in the chat. Yeah, I'd rather be playing Georgetown than Penn State. Or I'd rather be playing Georgetown than Ole Miss or, whatever. Now, has a lot of it run its course? Maybe so. But it's still got enough of something. And I think, it still matters. Maybe it's not as much to the players. Not that they're going to play less hard, but, it matters to a guy like Red. That means something. If there's a tie to the history that belongs to the head coach, he played them 9 times as a player. You look back to the players of the 80s and the 90s, like 4-year players, played the Hoyas twice a year, played them in the conference tournament a lot of times. I mean, there's people that have played Georgetown 8, 9, 10, 11 times in their career. You go back to that. You talk about hatred and all that stuff. Yeah, it can't be the same. It can't be the same. But that doesn't mean it has to be nothing. Would I like to see them play UConn? UConn's maybe a bad example right now, but yes, I say with great trepidation of due to UConn's recent success. Would I like to see him play Nova a little bit? Yeah. Would I like to see him play St. John's? Yes, in the Garden. More to get Syracuse down to the city for a game like that. The rest of the old Big East, I mean, there's the ones you still play. BC, Pittsburgh, the newer part of the old Big East, Miami, Virginia Tech. Like there's Louisville. Like there's plenty of former Big East teams in the ACC, the RNC every year. Do I need to see them play a Seton Hall? Do I need to see them play Providence? No. Like I'm good. I'm good on that. It's only just a few. I think there is room for the Georgetown game, if not every year, close to every year on the schedule. You got 11 non-conference games. It's not like football where you got 4. You got 11. You got 11. There's room. There's room for a game like this, and yeah, it's a Big East ACC game. Games like this make sense. It made slightly less sense. You look at net rankings and all that crap when the years that Georgetown was by God awful, the last few years of Patrick Ewing. But, that's over. Georgetown's probably on the come up here a little bit. Have a good head coach in Ed Cooley. Why not keep playing this series? I just don't see a whole ton of a downside to playing a game like this. That gives you at least a little shot in the arm of energy throughout the fan bases here at this time of the year in December, as we're about set to launch into conference play for the rest of the way in a few weeks. What do we got as far as keys to this game here today? This is 2 bad 3-point shooting teams. Both are bottom 40 in the country. The Orange are bottom 15 currently. Syracuse is shooting 27% from 3. Georgetown is shooting 29% from 3. All right, who can make like a few? I'm saying like you make 6 or 7 threes in this game, which is not a ridiculous number in modern college basketball. You may be well ahead of the game from the outside. Or if you can just avoid having to shoot them all together because you're doing work inside. But this is 2 poor 3-point shooting teams. Whoever can be just mediocre from the outside today may have a leg up. Young guy matchup. Freshman matchup. Donnie Freeman, Orange power forward. Thomas Sorber, Georgetown center. Donnie, 20 points 3 of the last 4 games. Sorber, leading scorer, leading rebounder for Georgetown. So that's something to keep an eye on today. Will they match up a lot? Center, power forward? Maybe. We don't know. Depends on Eddie Lampkin's health, rotations, all that stuff. But I think that those two guys will be interesting. We haven't mentioned this yet. The portal point guard matchup. Oh, we all remember back in the spring. Remember the name Malik Mack? Yeah, you do. We all wondered if Syracuse would get Malik Mack, the Ivy League Freshman of the Year, 17-point-a-game scorer out of Harvard last year. Well, he ended up at Georgetown, and he is now their starting point guard, averaging 12 points and 4.5 assists a game. We've told you about Jaquan Carlos. Those two will match up today. How will that go? Will Syracuse fans still rue not getting a guy like Mack today? Or will Carlos, who realistically his last 2 games have been his best 2, in a Syracuse uniform, will he continue to ascend to a passable status here today? You know what? I think Syracuse wins the game. I got 85-78, but realistically, I think it's going to be close today. Both teams' offenses likely ahead of both teams' defenses. Starting lineup for Syracuse is in. Back to Donnie Freeman in. It's Carlos, Chapa, Freeman, Bell, and Lampkin is the Orange 5 today for Georgetown. Malik Mack, Micah Peavy, their ace defender, Jaden Epps, one of the lone returning players, Drew Fielder, and Thomas Sorber, their star freshman in the middle. Those are the 5s. Listen to the game, of course, on TK99 and ESPN 1200. You can watch it on ACC Network today. Kevin Brown, our friend and yours, Syracuse grad, will be on the call today, along with Chris Patola, who don't let this sway you, but he is Coach K's son-in-law, so there is that. Just file that away. Good dude, though. We like Chris. So all that, and then come back right here after the game. Tim Leonard's got you for post-game coverage after. All right, everybody, enjoy the game. We're back later. Cuse Sports Talk, ESPN Radio.
The Sports Show.